Hi, this is the sixth lecture in the series on group actions. Uh, let's quickly recapitulate what you have done so far, especially those which will be relevant to what we are going to do or what we are going to use today. Okay, so let me share the screen. Yeah, for the benefit of saving time, I had already written down. Okay, so that you can quickly look at. Let's assume G is a group active on a set X. Then we have defined X is equivalent to Y if only if there is a G which takes X to Y. That is G dot X equal to Y. We have seen that there's equivalence relation. But you had also defined for any X in the set X, we have defined what is meant by the orbit. The orbit of X is defined to be G dot X, where G varies over G. Right? And what you have seen is the equivalence class of any X in the set X is nothing other than orbit of X. And hence, what do we get? Given any two elements X and Y, then either take the two orbits of Y of Yx and Oy, either they do not have any point in common, that is their intersection is empty, or they have to be identical because they are equivalence classes, right? The next thing is, let us take a transversal. This is a fancy terminology I'm using for it is a collection of a unique representative from each of the orbit. From each of the orbit, you take only one representative. It does not matter. It doesn't have to have any kind of significant way of choosing the representative. Just you choose one. This is just for counting purpose. Okay. Now the equivalence classes, that is orbits, therefore they form a partition. Okay. So how do I write this partition? That's the reason why I introduced T, the unique set of representatives. Okay, therefore X will be disjoint union of the orbits X, where X varies over the set of representatives, what I call transversal. Okay, this is the crucial thing. If X is finite, then we can count the number of elements here. We'll come to that in a minute. I want to say mod X, that is cardinality of X, number of elements in X, equal to summation of mod Yx, number of elements in Yx as X varies over the transversal. All right. So I would like to know how to find the number of elements in the orbit so that I can reconstruct X. Right. Now, for that, we have done something easy. Fix any X in X. We have defined what is meant by the stabilizer subgroup of X. That is set of all elements and the group elements which will leave X invariant or fixed set G dot X equal to X. We have seen there is a bijection from the set G by the stabilizer to the orbit of X. Therefore, how many elements are there in the orbit? Assuming that orbit is finite, it is same as the index of the subgroup, stabilizer subgroup in G. Okay, this is G is to what one usually denotes in algebra group theory, G is to stabilizer of X. This is O of X. Okay, these are the things we have seen. Right? Okay, we will quickly dispose of one more thing. Okay, it's strictly speaking, I don't need it for today, but let me do that. Suppose Y belong to O of X, right? Right. Now I know, then this implies, in fact, it's if and only if Y equal to Yx. Okay, this is orbit of X. Okay, now we know orbit of X, okay, is the index of, let me call it, index of stabilizer of X. But since it's also equal to O of Y, this should also be equal to index of G into stabilizer of Y. Right? So is there any relation between stabilizer of X and stabilizer of Y? Okay. Relation. This means only relation, no equivalence relation. Okay. Is there any relation between stabilizer of X and stabilizer of Y? That's a question. But that's very easy. Okay. What we claim is, okay, let A, B, and G be such that A dot X equal to Y. Okay. You understand? Now suppose G is in the stabilizer of X, right? G is the stabilizer of X. Now this implies what? This implies X equal to A inverse of Y, right? Therefore, G dot X equal to G dot A inverse of Y. Yeah, but G, since G belongs to stabilizer, it's the same as X. But this X is same as A inverse Y. Therefore, what we have got is A inverse Y equal to G into A inverse of Y. Okay, let A operate on both sides, then I get A into A inverse Y. That is identity Y, which is Y. This is equal to A G A inverse Y. You understood that? So what I have shown now? I have shown that if G belongs to the set, okay, what does this say? This says as A G A inverse of Y equal to Y. So that means A G A inverse belong to the stabilizer of Y. So what I have done is, starting with the G in stabilizer of X, I ended up with A G A inverse, which is in stabilizer of Y. Therefore, A stabilizer X, A inverse is a subset of stabilizer of Y. This is actually subgroup because these are subgroup. Is that clear? Yes? Okay. Now I claim these are equal. Let us just draw a picture quickly. So let us say this is my X and this is my Y and this is my A, which takes this. Therefore, this is my A inverse. Right? Now G leaves this invariant. Yeah? So what I have is G, this is my G, takes X to itself. Right? Therefore, let us look at that. Right? From Y, I travel by A inverse to X and apply G, I get it to X and apply A, I get to Y. Do you understand this? Therefore, what I have done? A inverse followed by G followed by A. That is A G A inverse leaves Y invariant. That's what you have seen. Is the picture clear? Okay. Now, what is the next one? I want to prove they are equal. What does that mean? If you give me any, let us say G in stabilizer of Y, I want to say G belong to A stabilizer of X into A inverse. This is what I want to prove. But that's very easy. What does that mean? I have to look for G equal to A, let us say H, A inverse for some H. I have to solve for this H. But what is that H? Multiply this by A inverse G A, then I will have H. You understand that? Yeah. Therefore, what I have shown is any element G in stabilizer of G comes as a conjugate of an element from, conjugate by A of an element from stabilizer of X. Yeah. Therefore, what you have shown is, if, okay, let us work it. If Gx equal to Y, okay, we have shown that, then stabilizer of X, okay, how I call it to A, sorry, A dot X. A stabilizer of X, A inverse, this will be a subgroup, this subgroup is the stabilizer subgroup of Y. You understand that? Therefore, they have the same cardinality. They have the same number of elements if they are finite. Is that all right? Okay. Keep this in mind. This is a new fact which you have not seen earlier. Okay, this is a fact which you have seen today. But that's enough. But let's come back to the original thing. Therefore, my set X, okay, I have this equation. Okay, this is a kind of abstract class equation. I'll call it class equation. but it's abstract classification. We will come to that in later. Okay. All right. Now this whole thing makes sense. Let us assume X is finite. Therefore, orbits are also finite. Therefore, look at the sum of the orbits. Right. Now let us look at it. Before we go further, let us try to play with this. These are all finite, right? So once I have a number, a positive natural number, what is the kind of thing we will ask for? Divisibility, right? And divisibility is best played with prime numbers, right? So let us ask for two. We will have some two kind of investigations in this case. So let me write. Right. Now suppose these are all finite. Okay. If you know cardinality, this result is still true, but that will not give us what we want. Suppose P is a prime and P divides mod X. Okay, divides. What does this mean? That means P must divide this one. So I will not write the index. Okay, right. Okay, this is very easy. There is nothing interesting. But suppose P does not divide O of X for some X. Suppose this happens. What can you conclude? But remember, P divides on the left side. P divides the left side. And P does not divide one of the terms on the right side. So what can you conclude? Yes, there exists a y in T. Y is not equal to X, so that P does not divide O. Is that clear? Yeah, it looks very silly, right? But there is something very interesting. Okay, in particular, let us see. Now we know, suppose G is also a finite group now. See, now we are restricting X to be finite, G also finite group, right? Now let's play with this. Okay, now I know mod G equal to the index of G is to Gx, the stabilizer subgroup, into orbit of X, number of elements in the orbit of X. Is that clear? This we have seen by the one-to-one correspondence earlier. Yeah? Okay. Now suppose my P does not divide the number of elements in the orbit. Then what does it mean? Suppose P also divides mod G, but P does not divide the orbit. That means P must divide the index. Sorry, not the index. I'm sorry. This is equal to orbit of index. Therefore, this is modulus of Gx. Yeah. This is the index. This is G is to H into H. Yeah. I'm sorry, I wrote wrongly. So therefore, P does not divide order of G. That means P does not divide this number, but P divides this, and P is a prime. Therefore, I know P must divide the order of the stabilizer group. These are all some playing with that, but not okay. Keep that in mind. When we want to use, you will immediately understand why we observed this. This is just an observation. And the second observation I can make is something very interesting. Let us look at X equal to summation the orbits of X, where X is in a transversal, right? Assume that I want to count the number of elements in X. X is finite. Again, we are assuming X is finite, G is finite, etc., etc. Because hereafter, most of the cases will be working with finite groups, finite acting on a finite set, because we want to look at some what do you call arithmetic properties of numbers. Okay, right? Some divisibility, etc. Okay, right? Now, can you think of? Okay, now notice that number of transversal. Okay, that has to be finite again because X is finite. Therefore, number of T will be finite, right? can you think of a situation where for any x, this is same as the number of elements in the orbits in x is same as number of elements in the orbit of y for every xy in t? Can you think of such a situation? We have seen it. We have seen such an example. Yes? Yeah. When we let H a subgroup of G acting on G, okay, then each of the orbits we saw, orbit of X is Hx, right coset, right? And each right coset is in bijetic corresponding with H, namely H going to H times X. This is a bijection. So all the elements, okay, each of the orbits have the same number of elements. Call that number as M. Okay, let M equal to order of X, orbit of X for every X in capital T. Right? Then what do I have? I have mod X equal to number of elements in T into M. Yeah? What does this say? M divides order of X, number of elements in X. Yeah? Is that clear? Okay, pause, review, proceed. Now we are ready to give applications of group actions. There will be a lot more applications, but these are the very three simple applications which will try to give you how to effectively use the group action technique. Okay. Please remember what I said in one of the earlier lectures. Group action is a very important tool in finite group theory. So it's better that you master that. Okay. In fact, all the advanced theory of finite groups is established by group action techniques. Okay. So first thing is Lagrange's theorem. You would already know, say, a proof, but let's try to understand this. What is the thing? We know G is a finite group. H is a subgroup of G. Then we want to say order of H divides order of G. This is our conclusion. This is Lagrange's theorem. Right? So order of G. Okay. Now let's look at what we did just now. Okay. Look at these examples. What did it say? So how to get it by group action? Can somebody guess? Yes. What do you do? Let H act on G via left action. Okay. So what are the orbits? Orbit of any G is Hg right coset. Okay. Right. Okay. Now suppose T is set of a transversal for this action. Then G is going to be union of Hg as G varies over T, and this is a partition, disjoint union. All these things we already know. Therefore, by the earlier thing, we know this is going to be G in T, right? Number of elements in G equal to sum of the number of elements in each of the orbits, as the orbits vary over distinct orbits. Okay. But what did we know? We already know the number of elements in H is exactly the same as number of elements in, number of elements is H. Okay, via the bijection H going to H times G. Therefore, this is mod h, how many times? As many times as there are number of elements in T. Therefore, this is mod T times mod h. You understand? Therefore, this implies Lagrange's theorem. Okay. So, the standard way is we are interpreting as a group action technique. There we simply define the left coset, right coset, etc. Then we wrote G as a disjoint union of, let's say, left cosets. Usually that's a standard algebra proof. Then we showed that given into left coset, they are identical or they are disjoint. Okay. Therefore, we got a partition of G. Then we observed each of the coset has the same number of elements as the number of elements in the subgroup. Then we derived Lagrange's theorem. The same thing is what we are doing, except why did I look at left coset or right coset? That's because of the group action. Okay. Now let's look at a second example. Okay. Now G is a finite group. Assume mod G equal to 2 times n. That is an even. Okay. It's a finite group of even order. Okay. I want to say there exists an element of order 2 in G. Okay. This is what we want to prove. Do you remember what group action I should use? Yeah. I think in the first lecture itself, we observed some group action and said when the orbit is a singleton, if and only if the element is of order less than or equal to 2. Do you remember that? How many of you remember? What are the action? The group was multiplicative group of plus or minus 1. Okay. Since I used already G, let H be the group. It's not a subgroup of G. Okay. Right. Now H acts on G. How does it act? 1 dot G is G, minus 1 dot G is G inverse. All right. Okay. Then what do we know? Orbit of any G consists of G and G inverse. But when is it 1? It is, okay, orbit of G equal to G if and only if G equal to G inverse. That is if and only if G squared equal to identity. Right? So if G is not equal to E and G squared equal to identity, that implies order of G is 2. Is that clear? Okay, it has to be a prime. Order of G must be a divisor of 2, but the only divisors of 2 are 1 and 2. So it cannot be 1, therefore it has to be 2. Okay? Right. Is that clear to you? Good. So what do we have to do now? We have to count the number of orbits which are singletons. Right? How do I do that? Let's go. So what we know from the thing, this is going to be, okay, let us write orbit of x1 plus orbit of xr plus orbit of xr plus 1 and plus orbit of xk. Okay, that is my x1, x2, xk is a transversal. Therefore, this will be modulus. Sorry. Let me further assume I chose the index in such a way that orbit of xj is equal to 1 for 1 less than equal to j less than equal to r. Do you understand what I am doing? Right. And orbit of xj for j greater than r, this will be 2. Remember, orbit can have either one element or two elements. Right? The first r orbits have one element. Each one of them have only one element, whereas remaining orbits have two elements. Each of them will have two elements. Is it okay? Now try to understand this. Now I have mod G equal to R because these constitute R plus summation of xj and j running from R plus 1 to whatever it is k. Right? Now, what do I want to do is, one usually says read it modulo 2, but if you are uncomfortable with that, try to understand. This is divisible by 2, right? 2 divides this left side, and 2 divides each of these orbits OXJ, where J is running from R plus 1, okay? Because number of elements is exactly 2. Therefore, these are, each one of them is divisible by 2. Therefore, these are all, the sum is also divisible by 2, right? Therefore, what do I know? R must be divisible by 2. 2 must divide R. Is that clear? So one usually says read it modulo 2, that is mod 2. This is how one writes. When I read mod 2, this is 0, and this is R, and this is 0. Therefore, what do I have? R equal to 0 mod 2. Therefore, R is congruent to 0 mod 2. In other words, R is an even number. Is that clear? Therefore, R is an even number. But notice that there is one element with a single orbit always, namely identity orbit. So O of E equal to 1. With our loss of generality, let me assume X equal to E1. X equal to E, not E1, E. Yeah? Right? Therefore, you understand? Yeah? Right. So the R must at least be equal to 2. Okay? In that, I have counted for this orbit corresponding to identity element, which is one element. But it's the order of the identity element is 1. Therefore, I have shown that there exists at least R minus 1, okay, elements of order 2, because each of the other, yes, okay, x1, x2 to xr, x2 to xr, each one of these elements must have order 2, because, do you understand that? Yes, because they are not identity. Okay, none of them is identity, but all of them have the property equal to identity for 2 less than equal to j less than equal to r. Therefore, there are r minus 1 elements of order 2. Since r is even, what you have shown is there exists odd number of elements of order 2 in any group of even order. Do you understand the proof? Okay, pause, review, and then proceed. Now let's look at the last example. Let us assume G is a group now, okay, and let G act on G by a conjugation action. Do you recall what it is? Okay, A dot G is AG A inverse. That's action. Okay. Now what do we know? Each of the orbit of X is nothing other than conjugacy classes. Gx, G inverse, G varies over G. These are usually called conjugacy classes. And these are called conjugates of X, and this is called conjugacy class. Right? Usually in that case, one usually denote by C of X, C for conjugacy. This is a classical notation for a conjugacy class. So let me do that. Okay. Now you can ask for what is the stabilizer of this. Okay, you had already seen, but let me quickly recall what is the stabilizer. It is G in G, such that G dot X, namely Gx G inverse, must be equal to X. But this happens if and only if Gx equal to Xg. That means G must commute with G. Therefore, this is known as a centralizer subgroup. Centralizer subgroup. Okay, let me call it centralizer subgroup G of X. Is that clear? Yes? Okay. This is the preliminary we needed. Okay. So let us therefore notice that what we have is, therefore, two facts we already observed, but let me try to quickly recall. Okay. G acts on this. right? Now we know therefore G by centralized is G of X. There is a bijection between this and C of X. This is the orbit of X and this is a stabilizer subgroup. Okay, number of cosets with respect to the stabilizer subgroup is the number of elements in the orbit. Do you understand this? This is, we had already seen. This is a bijection, right? Therefore, the number of element this, that let us do that. Mod G by Z G of X should be equal to the number of elements in the conjugacy class. Yeah, all right. Therefore, mod G equal to, is this clear? Yeah, okay, right. Now more or less I think we are through, right? Okay. Now let us assume G is a finite group of order p power n where p is a prime. What we want to prove is Z of G, that is the center of G is non-trivial. What does it mean? Notice that identity elements is always an element which commutes with all elements of G. So you want to say there is at least one non-identity element which commutes with every element of G. That's what we mean by this. So Z of G, the singleton G is a proper subset. That's what it means. Okay. So we want to say Z of G is non-trivial. Let us go through the last proof. Okay. How will you do that? So we want to say something about not G. Since P is a prime, if I show P divides the modulus of ZG, then this will have at least P number of elements. Since P is a prime, it has to be greater than or equal to 2. Therefore, this should have at least P elements. Therefore, it should have at least one non-trivial element in the center. Is that clear? So let us try to prove that. So what we know is mod G, let again T be a transversal for the action, for the conjugacy action. Okay. Then what do I have? So there are one orbits. Let us, yeah, just, we had already said it, but it's better that I'll recall. When is the orbit is a singleton? That is if and only if Gx G inverse, okay, must be X for all X, for all G, right? But this means Gx equal to Xg for all G. What does this say? X must be in the center of G. You understand that? Therefore, see, okay, counting the number of elements in the center is exactly same as counting the number of orbits which are singletons. Okay. Is that clear? Okay. Now we are through, right? Therefore, I can write again. Let us assume, okay, mod T equal to, let us say K, and let T equal to X1 XR plus 1 to XK. Let us assume orbit of Xj, namely it is the class of conjugacy class of Xj, call it Cj for time, okay, equal to 1 for the first R orbits. These are all singleton orbits. And these have more than one element. And so that modulus of Oxj is greater than 1 if J is greater than R. Is that clear? So we relabel T in such a way this happens. Now let us try to write the abstract class equation. This is what I call, but this is a class equation. Okay, what is the class equation? Abstract class equation becomes, it is mod Cj, j running from 1 to k mod, where the Cj's are conjugacy classes, and G equal to union, okay, j equal to 1 to k of Cj, or if you don't write, it is C of x as x varies over t. This is also called class equation. Okay, this is what called the classical class equation. Okay, therefore let me write this. The first R, this will constitute the center of G, plus what I have is, sorry, modulo Cj, j equal to R plus 1 to k. Right? Now let's go through. Now mod for j greater than R, mod Cj is greater than 1. And I also have mod x equal to mod, let me call the stabilizer, start with xj in Cj, and let's look at the stabilizer of xj, call it hj. Therefore, modulus of this is going to be stabilizer of xj into mod Cj, which is mod hj into mod Cj. Is that clear? For any, this is true for any j, in particular for j greater than R also. The reason why I want j greater than R is for the following reason. Right? Okay. Now let us look at. Now what do I know about hj? See, these are all greater than 1. Okay. Therefore, mod hj, okay, will be a proper subgroup of mod gj for j greater than equal j greater than R. And mod g is p power n. And therefore, mod hj must be some p power R, because it must be divisor by Lagrange's theorem. Right? Okay. Now, can this R be 0? Can it happen? Because R is 0 meaning hj is 1. Identity element. Yeah? Are you following this? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Right? Okay. So please understand. Okay. In fact, I don't need that. Let me look at it in a slightly different way. This is good enough. See, sorry for this. See, we know mod Cj is greater than 1, right? But what do I know is mod Cj equal to mod G by Hj. Yeah. Therefore, this must be of the form some p power R for some R greater than or equal to 0. It's an H. Okay. R in Z plus. Because it has to be divisor. Right? Yes. Okay. Now, can this be 0? Can R be 0? If R is 0, what does it mean? Hj equal to G. When does Hj equal to G? That is stabilizer of Xj equal to G. That implies Xj is in the center. But remember, all the central elements are less than R, or less than or equal to R. This is a contradiction. Right? If Xj equal to, then orbit of Xj will be 1. But it is Cj. That's a contradiction. Therefore, this R must be greater than or equal to 1. Do you understand this? Yeah? Right. So what I have shown now? I have shown that P divides left side mod G. P divides each of the summands. Right? Okay. Therefore, mod Zz equal to mod G minus this. Okay. This sum is also divisible by P. This is also divisible by P. Therefore, mod Zz is divisible by P. Therefore, mod ZG has at least p number of elements. Do you understand? One usually again reads it modulo this. If I read it modulo p, then this will be 0. This will be mod, this mod, sorry, plus 0. Therefore, we conclude mod ZG is congruent to 0 mod p. That means p divides mod g. Right? Now, since p is a prime, therefore, and E always belongs to ZG, okay, mod Z of G must have at least 2 elements. You remove E, then it should have at least one extra element. Therefore, mod ZG has at least P minus 1 elements. Therefore, P minus 1 elements other than identity. So we have proved the center is not equal to singleton alone. Okay, pause, review, proceed. Review the proofs of application 2 and application 3. Are you struck with something? What we had is something like this. We had something like this. Okay. Something here plus something here. And we said P divides this. P divides each of the sum, and therefore P must divide this. Yeah. But in each of this, what are the elements which are there? Okay. What kind of elements there? They are the elements of the form G dot X is equal to X. That is singleton for every G in G. Right? In the first group, it was minus 1 times X equal to X inverse. That should be equal to X. In the second case, G inverse must be equal to X. That means the orbits are singletons. Do you understand? So let us give a name in tune with analysis. Okay, we will say let G act on X, and we say X in X is a fixed point of the action. Here, for every G in G, G dot X equal to X. That is same as saying X is a fixed point if only if orbit of X consists of only X. Fixed point of the G action if and only if orbit of. Is that clear to you? Yes. So what we had here, and again in algebra textbook, the standard notation XG. Okay, set of all X in X, so that G dot X equal to X for all G in G. That is set of fixed points. Of the G action, right? Therefore, our pattern looks like this. Some X, okay, where X varies over T, and each of these orbits has more than one element. You understood that? Then we said something like P divides this on the left side, P divides each of the summands on the right side. Therefore, P should divide X mod G. That is, fixed points of G action. Not X mod G, X power G. This is just a notation. Do all of you agree with that? We want to give a proof. So let us make it a theorem. This is the last result. Let G be a finite group. Okay, finite group of order P power n. Okay, and let X be a finite set. Okay, where P is a prime, sorry. Let P be a prime, let G be a finite group order P power n, let X be a finite set, let G act on X, then the fixed points is congruent to 0 mod P. That means the number of fixed points is a multiple of P. Is the result clear? Notice that, pause, review, proceed. Earlier two cases are exactly this. Okay, let us go through the proof. Very easy. Okay, so as usual we write X. Okay, let T, remember it's a finite set. Let again we will do the same trick. I don't want to explain. These constitute singleton orbits. These are the orbits for which there are more than one element. Therefore, what do I have? Mod X equal to mod X power G plus summation modulus of OX. X isn't okay. OXJ, J running from R plus 1 to K. Right? Oh, I'm sorry. Again, I made a mistake. This is congruent to X mod P. Okay, you'll see the reason why I did that. Now let's come back to this. Right? Now let's look at J greater than or equal to R plus 1. How many elements are there in this? How many elements are there? There are as many elements as G mod G XJ, the stabilizer of XJ. Right? Now this has more than one element. This must be a divisor of P because mod G is P power n. Therefore, this must be a divisor of P power R, where R is greater than or equal to 0 and integer. Right? But can this R be 0? If R is 0, that means G equal to GXJ. What does that mean? That means the stabilizer of Xj is all of G. That means G dot Xj is Xj for all G. That means, okay, R bit of Xj will have one element. But we assume this is greater than one element. Therefore, this R cannot be 0. Do you understand this? This is exactly like the earlier argument. Okay? Right. Therefore, this is P power R, where R is greater than or equal to 1. In particular, therefore, P divides O of Xj for every J greater than or equal to R plus 1. You understood that? Therefore, this is divisible by P. Therefore, what do I have? Mod X minus the set of fixed points. Okay, this is divisible by P. You understand that? Because that is equal to this. Each of this element is divisible by P, therefore the sum is divisible by P, therefore this minus this is divisible by P. But that's a same as saying this is congruent to this, mod P. Is it okay? Review the proof. This is called a fixed point theorem for group actions. Okay. So what are the assumptions we had? Let's look at G is a finite group order P power n for P is a prime and X is a finite set. Then what did we find? The number of fixed points is congruent to the number of elements in X modulo P. This is what we proved. Okay. We will make use of this theorem in the next few lectures. Okay. Pause, review, proceed. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. And you can see I don't try remember things. All right. Let's look at the last one. I wanted to say because of the earlier two examples, mod x power g, that is mod of x power g is congruent to 0 mod p, whereas the correct thing is congruent to mod x. Mod x power g is congruent to mod x mod p. As when I go through the proof, you get it. Usually that's what I do. I don't write the theorem because I don't try to remember it as a rule. Okay. But you have confidence, you can think it back, get it. Okay. Thank you very much. I hope all of you enjoyed. Review that. We will meet again with the next lecture, namely 7th lecture.